Welcome back to the Overlanding Creation channel. Today I want to talk about a highly debated topic, which is 5.56 versus 300 Blackout for your primary AR-15. So I want to take a moment today to talk about a couple of the personal rifles that I have here, both in 5.56 as well as 300 Blackout, and then kind of what I've decided to do for me personally. I think 5.56 makes a great general purpose rifle. I've talked about that in videos in the past, and I still stand on that, and we'll talk about that in a little more in a second here. But probably the biggest thing for me recently is that I have switched to 300 Blackout for home defense use as my primary go-to rifle for home defense. And I'll get into maybe the reasons why I made that choice. And before we get too far down the trail, I do want to remind you guys to hit that subscribe button. I also ask that you please watch to the end of the video. You know, watch time is very important on YouTube. Really helps my channel as I try to build it. And there are also going to be some really interesting things that we talk about towards the end of the video as I actually get down to shooting these rifles and comparing both calibers head to head. This might be a little bit of an awkward angle, but unfortunately we have the sun setting over here and coming in, so I kind of have to do from this direction so you guys can actually see what's going on here. But I brought out 3 of my rifles just to give you some examples of different platforms and where these different calibers shine. For my 5.56, this particular rifle is a 14.5 inch barrel. I do have a 16 inch, but you know, I really don't think there's much of a difference between those 2 barrels in terms of velocity. We're not gonna be chronographing or anything today, but the reason why I did bring 2 300 Blackout rifles out today was because that is kind of something that the 300 Blackout shines in. So I'm not going to go into the whole history of it. You know, 300 Blackout's been around for a long time. Many YouTube channels have talked about it. So I want to make this channel very kind of real world, just talking about my personal experience and what matters ultimately, because we can talk about ballistics, we can talk about you know, when the 300 Blackout was designed, started as a Wildcat and then, you know, became SAMI certified, and it really doesn't benefit us, right? Like how do I use that information? The reality is you don't. So what I'm just talking about today is what can you actually use these rifles and these calibers for. When I initially got into 300 Blackout, I started out with this, which is a 16 inch barrel. You know, if you're using 300 Blackout with a full length 16 inch barrel, you're getting maximum velocity out of the caliber. And I've noticed that a lot of people tend to compare 300 Blackout rifles like this one. This is a little 7.5 inch barrel. I've actually seen them shorter than this. If you prefer a different barrel length, great. You know, drop a comment down below. Let me know what barrel length you choose, why it works best for you. This is my personal opinion. If you go much shorter than a 7.5 inch barrel, or let's say 7 inch barrel, at that point, it's practically a handgun. You know, now obviously this is classified as a pistol according to the ATF, right? Don't want to break the rules there. I do have a pistol brace on here, so I do kind of have to be careful. It's sad that this is the world we live in. We have to be careful with the lingo that we use in order to stay compliant. But yes, so this is technically classified as a pistol because I have a pistol brace. I don't have an actual rifle stock on it. I'm just talking about in terms of barrel length. If you get much shorter than a 7 inch barrel, you're kind of reaching the realm of an actual handgun. In my mind, that kind of defeats the purpose. Now, yes, you are getting more capabilities out of the 300 Blackout. It's a more powerful round, but just to keep it simple for today, guys, in my opinion, this length, 7.5 inch, is probably the shortest I'll ever go on barrel length. And to me, I don't really see much benefit going any shorter than that. You lose so much. And there was also the biggest misnomer, and I don't want to go too far into this because again, I know I tend to ramble a little bit. You guys let me know in the comments. So, you know, for the sake of not rambling, when 300 Blackout first came out, or in the early days, a lot of people said that you could get full burn of the powder in these shorter barrel lengths, and there was no benefit to going to a longer barrel. That has actually since been disproved. So with a 7.5 inch barrel, you are losing powder. In fact, you can see it coming out of the barrel when you shoot. There is a good bit of unburned powder. Now, the benefit of the 300 Blackout over the 5.56 is that the powder, being that it's a pistol powder, anyone who reloads, you know that there's a difference between rifle powder and pistol powder based on the burn rate. So the burn rate of the 300 Blackout powder is a lot faster, which means that powder is going to burn and create that explosion, that propulsive effect in a shorter length barrel. That being said, you are still losing benefit with the shorter barrel. So a 16-inch barrel is not an entire waste. I've seen a lot of people say that a 16-inch barrel is dumb on a 300 Blackout because you're losing the benefits of the shorter barrel. It's nice that you can go to a shorter barrel and still have a lot of the powder burn, but make no mistakes, you do get more velocity out of the longer barrel. So I just want to mention that. One other pro that you could say for the 300 Blackout, other than shorter barrel length options, is suppressibility. With 300 Blackout, you get the ability to shoot subsonic, and that's huge. So you'll notice that most of my guns here, I run a suppressor on, and I'll show you here in the video. If you run subsonic 300 Blackout suppressed, it's extremely quiet. You can shoot it without hearing protection. I'm sure it's still recommended to use hearing protection, but just being honest, you don't need hearing protection. It's extremely quiet, and you just don't get those capabilities out of the 5.56. So the 300 Blackout is, in my opinion, the best rifle caliber option, AR-15 option for home defense, in the fact that you can have a very short platform, very easy to maneuver in the home. You can run it suppressed with subsonic ammo. It's going to be extremely quiet. Now, at the end of the day, if stopping the bad guy results in damaging the hearing of your children or your spouse or other people in the house, as long as they're protected, they're alive, that's what matters, right? And I agree with that. However, I don't think that we should be negligent and just say, well, I don't really care about blowing out the eardrums of my 2-year-old sleeping in his crib because I'm protecting his life. I think that where possible, if we can neutralize the threat quietly, protect the hearing of ourselves and others in the house, I think there's a benefit there. And then also, you know, it doesn't raise as much alarm. I think it was Grand Thumb that talked about, you know, like more clandestine missions or operating in the city or in an apartment or something like that. And I don't want to go too much into that because there's a lot that's involved there, but I did like his perspective of, you know, drawing a crowd isn't always a good thing. So if you live in the city, or if you just have neighbors, I live out in the country, but I still have neighbors, and if there's a bunch of shooting that goes on in the middle of the night, it's probably going to draw some attention. You know, whether that's, you know, a big deal, that's kind of your you'll have to decide on that. But either way, I like the option of being able to be quiet and not have to worry about having a super loud signature if I am defending my home. So I think that pretty much sums it up. I know that I tend to get a little long-winded, so I do apologize for that, but I just want to go over some of the benefits that I see in the 300 Blackout. Now, like I said, I do still have my 16-inch barrel 300 Blackout. This is a really great rifle. It's one of my favorite rifles. It's a Wilson Combat 16-inch, and as far as I'm concerned, the 300 Blackout can stand toe-to-toe with the 5.56 and in some cases actually outperform. I know that is going to be very controversial. There's probably going to be a lot of people that are going to jump on that, but hear me out. One of the benefits of the 5.56 is its speed. In fact, I would argue that the only benefit of the 5.56 in terms of ballistic capabilities is the speed. If you remove the speed of the 5.56, it becomes a very, very subpar round. Now, we can't ignore speed. It's very important. So taking a small bullet, I personally use 77 grain for this rifle. Heavy for caliber, but still 77 grain is a pretty small bullet, pretty small projectile. So it's really relying on that speed to create that cavitation effect on the target, that violent, explosive effect when it rips through the target. And that's obviously a good thing. The 5.56 is very effective in terms of that, and it's been used for a long time. It's been used in a lot of wars, and it's in a lot of ways it's kind of the American rifle cartridge, right? It's something that's been used so heavily in recent history with our military. So I still love the round. I think 5.56 is incredibly capable. I like the fact that the ammo is cheap. You can stockpile it. And in my opinion, where this specific round really fills its niche is in more of a wartime setting. And I know that the military has looked at other newer calibers. You have the SIG XM7, or just the M7 now, I think, that it's been adopted. You know, 5.56, it's America's sweetheart. You really can't ignore it. And I think it's going to be around for a very long time. However, when I really started looking into the 300 Blackout, I've always been a big fan of 30 caliber. You know, I like doing long range shooting, 308, 300 Win Mag, very, very powerful, capable rounds. So to me, when I was first introduced to 300 Blackout, the idea of having a 30 caliber projectile in a very small AR-15 platform. I have an AR-308 or an AR-10, actually, an Armalite AR-10. That thing's kind of big and bulky, and it's not going to take the place of your regular like infantryman's rifle, so to speak. So the standard AR-15, the reason why it's so popular is because it's small, it's light, it's easy to use, it's easy to carry. So when I heard that I could get a 30 caliber round, which in my mind, larger caliber, heavier projectile, it's going to be more lethal. I was intrigued by it. So that's kind of when I went down the road of 300 Blackout, and I'm glad I did, because this is my take on it. You can get really heavy projectiles for a 300 Blackout. You can get 220 grain subsonics. However, with a subsonic, you're losing the speed, like we talked about with the 5.56. You're losing that explosive ability on target. You're not going to have the cavitational effect. You're also not going to have the expansion of the bullet, which is a big deal when it comes to lethality. But I think a lot of people overlook the ability of 300 Blackout if you compare it head to head with the 5.56. So if we just take a 16-inch barreled 5.56, a standard AR-15 full length rifle, and we're using the 77 grain OTM ammo that I use, which has become very popular, that is traveling right around 2,700 feet per second. If we compare it to a 300 Blackout that's in the same category, like let's think about you know, two boxers in the same weight range. You got two heavyweights, right? It wouldn't make sense to compare a 16-inch 5.56 or even a 14.5 5.56 with a little shorty pistol 300 Blackout that's shooting like subsonics. It's two completely different projectiles, two completely different use cases. I like to compare them in the same weight class. So let's look at a 16-inch 5.56 AR-15, where you have a 77 grain bullet traveling about 2,700 feet per second. And if we compare it to a 16-inch 300 Blackout shooting a 110 grain projectile, it will be traveling slower, but not much. They're traveling at right around 2,400 feet per second. So we're talking about a difference of only about 300 feet per second, even less than that, depending on the type of round you use. Those margins can become very, very close to where the 300 Blackout with a 110 grain 30 caliber projectile is traveling nearly the same speed as a 77 grain 5.56. So you're thinking about a much smaller projectile, 22 caliber, 77 grain versus a 30 caliber, 110 grain. You can even step up to like 125 grain VMAX, which you're not losing much velocity. You're still well over 2,000 feet per second, 22, 23, 2,400 feet per second. So you're still getting expansion. You're still getting cavitation. You're still getting a lot of the benefits of the 5.56 round, but you're getting a bigger bullet. So in theory, you're getting more energy on target. So I think if you really compare the two head to head like that, you can see where the 300 Blackout, it holds its own, and in a lot of cases it will actually outperform the 5.56. And obviously with the 16-inch barrel 300 Blackout, you still have the capability of running subsonic. So you can run 110 grain VMAX or 110 grain, like I use the black, the saber blade black tips from AAC, and they work fantastic, a lot of expansion. However, I can switch to subsonic whenever I want Especially with a 16-inch barrel, you don't need to modify anything because you have enough back pressure. You can run that with or without the suppressor. So it gives you that one additional capability, so you can kind of almost outperform the 5.56 on the supersonic side of things, but then you have this whole other realm of subsonic that you just don't get with the 5.56. So I know I've been hating on the 5.56 a lot in this video, and I don't want it to come across that way because I still am a firm believer in 5.56. I absolutely love the caliber and the rifle. And the truth is, if, you know, tomorrow the apocalypse kicked off and I need to grab a battle rifle, I'm going to go with the 5.56. I have much more ammo for it, and it's going to be a lot easier to access on the fly. And this particular rifle is a Geissele URGI. I know this rifle is bulletproof, and I know it's going to perform well. So it would still be my go-to rifle in that, you know, kind of doomsday scenario. So I don't want to discredit it in any way. But I think for general use, like I said, for home defense, or more of a specific scenario where you don't have to rely on, you know, hordes of ammo or a doomsday scenario, I think the 300 Blackout has actually kind of risen to certainly match the 5.56 in capability and potentially almost even exceed the 5.56 in capability. But enough talking, let's go ahead and get shooting. All right, that'll do it for today, guys. Do appreciate you watching the end of the video. Make sure you drop a comment down below. I know it's a highly debated topic, and I'm sure there's a lot of things I said in today's video that many people disagree with, and I'm okay with that. So let me know in the comments down below what your opinion is on both these rounds. Which one would you choose for home defense? Which one would you choose to go to war with in a doomsday scenario? Either way, let me know in the comments down below. As always, guys, if you like this type of content, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out. And I always appreciate when you watch the end of the video because that also helps a lot too. So thanks again, guys, and I will catch you in the next video.